Frank Winters straightened his tie and took a deep breath. The massive alien ship loomed ahead, dwarfing the small human shuttle. This was humanity's first official meeting with the Galactic Confederation, and as Earth's chief diplomat, Frank felt the weight of 7 billion lives on his shoulders. "Final approach to docking bay," said Linda Powell, the shuttle pilot. Her voice was steady, but Frank saw the tension in her hands. "Everyone ready?" Frank asked, looking at his small team of 5 diplomats. Nancy Brooks, his deputy, nodded. "As ready as we'll ever be." The shuttle docked with a gentle thud. Frank led his team through the airlock and into a vast chamber filled with strange smells and even stranger beings. Creatures of all shapes and colors stood in formal groups. Some had tentacles, others had multiple eyes, and a few seemed to float rather than stand. A tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 arms stepped forward. "Welcome, humans of Earth. I am Zorex, Chief Diplomat of the Galactic Confederation. We are pleased to finally meet your species formally." Frank bowed slightly. "The pleasure is ours, Chief Diplomat Zorex. I am Frank Winters, representing Earth and all humanity." Zorex's large eyes blinked slowly as he looked past Frank, searching the area behind the human delegation. "Your warriors have not yet disembarked." "Warriors?" Frank asked, confused. "We didn't bring any military personnel. This is a diplomatic mission." A ripple of whispers spread through the alien groups. Frank noticed many of the other species had uniformed individuals standing at attention behind their diplomats. "Curious," said Zorex. "All member species bring their finest warriors to diplomatic meetings. It is tradition, a sign of respect and strength." Frank smiled politely. "On Earth, we prefer to separate diplomacy from military matters. We come seeking peaceful relations, not to display our strength." A red-skinned alien with sharp ridges along its spine made a harsh clicking sound. "Do humans not value strength?" it asked. "We value strength," Frank replied carefully. "But we also value showing the right type of strength for each situation. Today, we bring the strength of our words and our desire for friendship." The aliens exchanged glances. Some seemed confused, others suspicious. Frank noticed several using devices to scan his team. Zorex gestured toward a large doorway. "Please, follow me to the council chambers. We have much to discuss." As they walked, Nancy whispered to Frank, "They all brought soldiers. Should we be worried?" "Stay calm," Frank whispered back. "Different cultures, different customs. We'll learn as we go." The council chamber was enormous, with a circular table surrounded by sections for each species. Frank noticed that each delegation had diplomats seated at the table, while their warriors stood behind them. When the humans sat down with empty spaces behind them, it created an odd visual gap that many aliens kept glancing at. During the initial discussions about trade, territories, and basic protocols, Frank caught several alien representatives sending messages to each other while looking at the humans. After 4 hours of talks, they took a break. Frank found Zorex approaching him privately. "Ambassador Winters," Zorex said quietly, "your approach is unusual. Some species interpret the absence of warriors as either extreme confidence or extreme weakness." Frank considered this information carefully. "What does your experience tell you about us?" Zorex's upper arms made a gesture Frank couldn't interpret. "I am undecided. But I advise caution. Not all species are as diplomatic as mine." "Thank you for the advice," Frank said. "We'll keep it in mind." Later, when the human team returned to their shuttle, Frank immediately sent an encrypted message to Earth's Security Council. "First contact successful," he wrote. "But we've discovered something interesting. In this galactic community, everyone brings their military to diplomatic functions. Our choice not to do so has made us stand out. They can't quite figure us out, which might work to our advantage. Request guidance on how to proceed." As the shuttle pulled away from the massive alien ship, Frank gazed out at the stars. Humanity had joined a much larger community, but they were already breaking the rules without even trying. He wasn't sure if that was good or bad, but it certainly was interesting. 6 months had passed since the first contact. Humanity was now invited to a regional summit on the neutral space station Harmony. The massive ring-shaped station rotated slowly against the backdrop of a purple nebula. Frank Winters had brought a slightly larger team this time. Among them was Samantha Reed, a quiet woman with short brown hair who served as his assistant. She kept to herself, rarely speaking unless spoken to, always taking notes on her tablet. The main meeting hall buzzed with activity as representatives from 12 species gathered. The human delegation once again stood out for their lack of military escorts. "Still no warriors, Earthman?" asked Grok, a tall, scaled representative of the Krell. His voice was deep and rumbling, like stones falling down a hillside. 2 armored Krell soldiers flanked him, their hands resting on what looked like weapons. "Just diplomats," Frank replied with a calm smile. "We find it works best for us." Grok made a noise that might have been a laugh. "Weakness does not work best for anyone. You humans are strange." Before Frank could respond, the station's alarms began to sound. Red lights flashed along the walls. "We are being boarded," announced the station's voice. "Security breach in Docking Bay 3. Panic erupted in the meeting hall. The warrior escorts of each delegation moved to protect their diplomats. "Everyone stay calm," said Frank, raising his voice. "We should." His words were cut short as the doors to the hall burst open. 6 armed figures in environment suits rushed in, weapons raised. "Nobody move," shouted their leader. "This station is now under our control." The alien warriors hesitated, looking to their diplomats for orders. The intruders used this moment of confusion to force everyone against the walls. "All communication devices on the floor," ordered the leader. "Anyone tries to be a hero, we start shooting diplomats." The room fell silent as everyone complied. The attackers began collecting the devices. "What do you want?" asked Zorex, the blue-skinned diplomat from the first contact. "Ransom," said the leader. "Your governments will pay well for your safe return." Samantha Reed, Frank's quiet assistant, had been separated from the human group and stood near the water dispensers. She caught Frank's eye and gave a tiny nod. As one of the attackers passed her, she suddenly moved. Her hand struck out, hitting a precise spot on the attacker's neck. He dropped without a sound. In the same motion, she caught his weapon before it hit the floor. The other attackers didn't notice immediately. Samantha slid silently behind a column. She pressed something on the water dispenser panel, and suddenly the lights in the hall went out. Confusion erupted again. In the darkness, there were several thumping sounds, a cry of pain, and then silence. When the emergency lights came on 30 seconds later, 5 of the 6 attackers were unconscious on the floor. The 6th was pinned face down, with Samantha's knee on his back as she secured his hands with his own restraints. The alien delegation stared in shock. "Is everyone all right?" Samantha asked, her voice still quiet but now filled with authority. Frank stepped forward. "Yes, thanks to you." The station security forces arrived moments later, taking custody of the attackers. "Who is she?" asked Grok, the Krell representative who had mocked humans earlier. His tone was now respectful, even awed. "Samantha Reed, my assistant," Frank said simply. "But she fights like a top-tier warrior," said Zorex, studying Samantha with new interest. Samantha straightened her jacket and picked up her tablet, which she had set down carefully before acting. "I had some training," she said modestly. Later, when the human delegation returned to their quarters, Grok approached Frank in the corridor. "The human who subdued the attackers," he said. "She is not just an assistant, is she?" Frank smiled. "On Earth, Samantha was a Navy SEAL, one of our most elite military units. Before becoming a diplomatic aide, she served in combat zones for 10 years and received our highest honors for bravery." Grok's scaled eyebrows rose. "Yet you bring her as an assistant, not as a warrior escort." "We bring the people we need," Frank replied. "Sometimes they're the same people." As Grok walked away, Frank could hear him muttering, "Humans are more interesting than I thought." The news of what happened spread quickly throughout the station. The other species now looked at the human delegation with new eyes, wondering what other skills these seemingly simple diplomats might be hiding. 2 months after the incident on Harmony Station, Earth had become a topic of much discussion throughout the Galactic Confederation. Humans were now regular participants in various diplomatic forums, trade negotiations, and cultural exchanges. Their continued practice of sending only diplomats without military escorts remained unusual, but fewer species openly questioned it. On the Zorthan homeworld, in a secure underground facility, Intelligence Officer Kraz reviewed historical data about Earth. His purple skin reflected the glow of multiple screens showing human faces and information. "Computer, show me background information on Alan Pierce," Kraz said. A holographic display showed a middle-aged human man with short gray hair. Alan Pierce was Earth's chief negotiator for trade agreements. Alan Pierce, the computer voice stated, age 52. Before diplomatic service, United States Marine Corps, served 15 years, achieved rank of major, received Silver Star Medal for valor during conflict in Middle East region of Earth. Kraz's antenna twitched with interest. "Show me Carol Matthews." The display changed to show a woman with dark skin and braided hair. Carol Matthews, age 47. Current role, cultural attaché. Previous occupation, United States Air Force, tactical specialist. 12 years of service. Kraz leaned forward. "Computer, what percentage of Earth's diplomatic corps has military background?" Processing. Based on available data, approximately 63% of Earth's senior diplomatic personnel have served in military organizations or received formal combat training. "Fascinating," Kraz muttered. He tapped a communication panel. "Connect me with High Commander Vex." The screen changed to show another Zorthan, with darker purple skin and formal insignia. "This better be important," Kraz said the High Commander. "Sir, I believe I've discovered something significant about the humans. They don't bring warriors to diplomatic functions because many of their diplomats were warriors first." High Commander Vex's antenna stood straight up in surprise. "Explain." "I've analyzed their public records. Most of their representatives have military backgrounds. Remember Frank Winters from their first contact team. 20 years in their Navy before becoming a diplomat. That quiet female who stopped the attack on Harmony Station. Elite Special Forces. Are you suggesting deception?" Vex asked. "Not exactly, sir. They don't hide this information. It's in their public records, but they don't advertise it either. It seems to be normal practice for them." Vex rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Share your findings with our allies, but carefully. We need to understand the humans better." Word spread quickly among the more cautious species of the Galactic Confederation. The Drek Empire, known for their aggressive stance and warrior culture, took particular interest in this information. Meanwhile, on the human colony world of New Eden, Frank Winters and his team were meeting with local officials when his communication device buzzed. "Excuse me," he said, stepping aside to take the call. It was Eric Johnson, Earth's Director of Galactic Affairs. "Frank, we have a situation," Eric said, his face serious on the small screen. "Our intelligence suggests several species are investigating the backgrounds of our diplomatic personnel." Frank frowned. Was bound to happen eventually. What's their reaction? Mixed. Some are impressed. Others are suspicious. The Drek are particularly interested. "The Drek," Frank repeated with concern. The Drek Empire was the most militaristic species they had encountered so far. They might see it as deception. "Exactly," Eric agreed. "They've requested a formal meeting with Earth representatives, but they specifically asked for our warriors rather than diplomats." Frank thought for a moment. "Send Peter Grant. Ambassador Grant. Are you sure? He's perfect. 25 years of diplomatic experience, but also a former Army Ranger. He understands both worlds." Eric nodded. "I'll make the arrangements. But Frank, we need to be careful here. Some species see this as a cultural quirk, but others might view it as a deliberate strategy to infiltrate diplomatic circles with combat-trained personnel. It's not infiltration if it's just how we do things, Frank said. On Earth, we've always believed that those who understand war make the best advocates for peace. After ending the call, Frank looked out at the rolling hills of New Eden. Earth was still new to galactic politics, and they had much to learn. But it seemed the galaxy also had much to learn about humans. The Drek warship loomed large against the starry backdrop. Unlike the elegant curves of other alien vessels, the Drek ship was all sharp angles and protruding weapons. It resembled a massive metal predator waiting to strike. Ambassador Peter Grant stood tall as his shuttle approached the docking bay. At 60 years old, with silver hair and deep lines around his eyes, he carried himself with quiet confidence. Beside him stood his team, 3 diplomats who, like him, had once served in various Earth military branches. "Remember," Peter said to his team, "we're here as diplomats, not soldiers. But we don't need to hide who we were." The shuttle docked with a metallic clang. When the airlock opened, 6 Drek warriors stood waiting. They were imposing figures, nearly 7 feet tall with gray-scaled skin and amber eyes. Each wore ceremonial armor etched with symbols of personal victories. "I am Krodek, first warrior of the Drek Empire," said the largest of them. His voice was like grinding stone. "You are the warriors of Earth." Peter stepped forward and bowed slightly. "I am Peter Grant, ambassador of Earth. Before I became a diplomat, I served as what we call an Army Ranger, a special combat unit. My colleagues have similar backgrounds." Krodek's amber eyes narrowed. "You admit it freely." "There's nothing to hide," Peter replied. "On Earth, many who serve in diplomacy have military experience." The Drek warriors exchanged glances. "Follow," Krodek said simply. They were led through corridors lined with weapons and battle trophies from a dozen worlds. Eventually, they reached a large chamber with a circular table. Unlike typical diplomatic settings, this room felt like a war room, with maps of territories and images of military vessels projected on the walls. Commander Vrak, leader of the Drek Empire, waited at the head of the table. His armor was more elaborate than the others, and one of his eyes had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed red. "So the humans finally send their warriors," Vrak said, his voice surprisingly soft for such a fearsome figure. "Why the deception until now?" Peter took his seat calmly. "There has been no deception, Commander. I am a diplomat who was once a warrior. Both experiences inform how I approach peace. A warrior who pretends to be a mere talker is practicing deception." Vrak insisted. "I don't pretend to be anything other than what I am," Peter replied. "On Earth, we believe those who negotiate peace must understand war, but those who wage war must understand peace. The two are not separate for us." Commander Vrak leaned forward. "Explain." Peter thought for a moment. In human history, some of our greatest advocates for peace were once soldiers who saw the horrors of war firsthand. They fought so they understood the cost of fighting. They killed so they valued life more. They then used that knowledge to prevent more war. "Interesting philosophy," said Vrak, though his tone suggested skepticism. "But why not bring both diplomats and warriors, as others do?" "Because for humans, sometimes they are the same person," Peter explained. "I can speak of trade agreements and cultural exchange. I can also field strip a rifle in 30 seconds and have killed enemies in combat. Both are part of who I am." A low murmur ran through the Drek warriors in the room. "You are saying all human diplomats are warriors?" asked Krodek. "Not all," Peter clarified, "but many have military training or experience. We find it creates diplomats who truly understand what's at stake when negotiations fail." Commander Vrak studied Peter's face for a long moment. "We received reports of what your assistant did on Harmony Station. 1 female against 6 armed attackers." Peter nodded. "Samantha Reed. Yes, she was one of our best special forces operators before joining the diplomatic service. and you don't display this strength openly." Vrak seemed genuinely puzzled. "We don't feel the need to," Peter said simply. "In human culture, true strength doesn't need to be advertised. Those who know, know." Commander Vrak leaned back in his chair, his red cybernetic eye scanning Peter's face for deception. Finding none, he made a gesture that might have been respect. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we have been approaching humans incorrectly. Let us begin these negotiations again, warrior to warrior." Peter smiled slightly. "I would prefer diplomat to diplomat, but I accept the spirit of your offer." The negotiations with the Drek continued for 3 days. Progress was slow but steady. Peter Grant and his team were discussing trade routes when Commander Vrak received an urgent message. His red cybernetic eye flashed as he read it. "We must pause," Vrak announced. "A matter requires my attention." Peter nodded politely, but he noticed the Drek warriors exchanging meaningful glances. Something was happening. 10 minutes later, alarms blared throughout the ship. Commander Vrak returned with Krodak at his side. "Pirates have breached our lower decks," Vrak said flatly. "They seek to disrupt our meeting. My warriors will handle this. You will remain here for safety." As the Drek warriors left, Peter turned to his team. Did anyone else notice Vrak didn't seem surprised? Lisa Howard, a former Navy intelligence officer, nodded. "This feels staged. A test, perhaps." "I agree," said Bill Cooper, who had once been a Marine. "They want to see how diplomats react in danger." Peter smiled grimly. "Then let's show them." He quickly assessed the conference room. "Lisa, secure that door. Bill, help me move this table to create cover. Greg, find anything that could serve as a weapon." They worked quickly and efficiently. Lisa blocked the main door with a heavy cabinet. Bill and Peter flipped the massive metal table on its side. Greg collected items that could be used defensively. Decorative metal rods, a pitcher of water. Even the chairs could be weapons if needed. "Comms are jammed," Lisa reported after checking her device. "Expected," Peter replied. He removed his tie and rolled up his sleeves. "Remember, we're diplomats first. We defend, we don't pursue. But if they come through that door—" A loud bang interrupted him. Someone was trying to force the door open. "Positions," Peter said calmly. The door burst open. 3 figures in black armor rushed in, weapons drawn. They weren't expecting the rearranged room. The first attacker tripped over a chair Greg had placed in the entrance. As he fell, Peter moved with surprising speed for his age, disarming the intruder with a precise strike to the wrist. Lisa threw the water pitcher, hitting the second attacker in the face. The momentary distraction gave Bill enough time to close distance and deliver a powerful tackle. The third attacker fired his weapon, but he hit the overturned table instead of any humans. Greg used one of the metal rods like a staff, sweeping the attacker's legs from under him. In less than 30 seconds, all 3 pirates were subdued. Peter stood over them, holding one of their weapons. "These aren't pirates," he said, examining their gear. "Their weapons are Drek military issue." The door opened again. Commander Vrak entered with Krodak and several other Drek warriors. They stopped, taking in the scene of the 3 subdued attackers and the completely rearranged room. "Interesting," Vrak said. His voice carried a new tone, something close to respect. "A test," Peter stated. It wasn't a question. Vrak nodded. "Yes. We wished to see if human diplomats truly possessed warrior skills, or if the stories were exaggerated." "And?" Peter asked, handing the weapon back to Vrak handle first. "Most impressive," said Krodak. "You created a defensive position, used available materials as weapons, and disabled attackers without killing. These are the actions of trained warriors." Peter helped one of the fake attackers to his feet. "As I explained, on Earth, understanding both peace and conflict is valued in our diplomatic corps. The female diplomat moves like our best fighters," Krodak said, looking at Lisa with newfound respect. "Before diplomacy, I specialized in close-quarters combat," Lisa explained simply. Vrak made a gesture, and the test attackers left the room. Your demonstration raises new questions. If human diplomats are this capable, what are your actual dedicated warriors like? Peter smiled slightly. Let's hope maintaining peace means you never have to find out. Later, as the human team prepared to leave the Drek ship, Vrak approached Peter privately. The galaxy has misunderstood humans, he admitted. We thought you weak for not displaying your warriors. Now I see you had no need to display what was already present. Peter nodded. Sometimes the greatest strength is knowing when not to show it. News of the incident aboard the Drek warship spread quickly through galactic communication channels. Different species reacted in various ways to the revelation about Earth's diplomats. On the central hub world of Nexus Prime, representatives from 17 species gathered for an emergency meeting of the Galactic Security Council. The circular chamber buzzed with uneasy conversation. The humans are practicing deception, insisted Trelg, the insectoid delegate from the Vespid Collective. His mandibles clicked rapidly with agitation. They infiltrate diplomatic functions with disguised warriors. Not disguised, corrected Zorex, the blue-skinned diplomat who had first met humans. Their military backgrounds are in their public records. Why send former warriors as diplomats unless you plan something sinister? Asked the Krell representative, his scales bristling. In a quiet corner of the chamber, Galactic Intelligence Director Mirren reviewed data on her screen. As a member of the ancient Centauri race, she had observed the rise and fall of many civilizations. Her species was known for their analytical minds and patience. I have completed my assessment of human military structure, she announced, her voice cutting through the debate. The chamber fell silent. The findings are concerning. She projected a holographic display in the center of the room. Humans approach combat training differently than any known species. While all civilizations train dedicated warriors, humans distribute combat knowledge more widely among their population. The display showed statistics and images of human activities. Many of their educational institutions include basic combat instruction for young humans. They call it physical education and sports. Their entertainment media constantly depicts combat scenarios. Even their civilian emergency services receive tactical training similar to military units. Murmurs of concern rippled through the chamber. Are you suggesting all humans are warriors? Asked Zorex. Not exactly, Mirren replied. But their species has unusually widespread access to combat knowledge. Their civilian pilots can perform military maneuvers. Their medical personnel train for battlefield conditions. Their scientists understand weapons development. The boundaries we maintain between warrior and civilian classes are more fluid in human society. The Drek representative, who had replaced Commander Vrak for this meeting, stood up. Our recent interaction confirms this assessment. Their diplomatic team demonstrated coordinated defensive tactics without prior planning. They moved like a military unit. On Earth, Frank Winters watched the Galactic Security Council meeting through a secure feed. He sighed heavily and called Eric Johnson, the Director of Galactic Affairs. It's happening, Frank said when Eric's face appeared on the screen. They're starting to fear us. Eric nodded grimly. The conspiracy theories are spreading. Some species believe we're planning a galactic takeover, using our diplomats as advanced scouts. Ridiculous, Frank muttered. We're still figuring out how to navigate their political system. We're in no position to take over anything. You know that and I know that, Eric replied. But fear isn't rational. The Vespid Collective has already suspended diplomatic relations. The Krell are demanding inspections of our colonial outposts. Frank thought for a moment. We need to address this directly. Request an audience at the next full Galactic Confederation Assembly. We'll explain our approach to diplomacy openly. Who should represent us? Eric asked. Send John Kelly, Frank decided. As our senior ambassador, he has the experience to handle this, and his background gives him unique perspective. His background might make things worse, Eric warned. He was a general before becoming a diplomat. Frank smiled slightly. Exactly. If they're going to fear us for who we are, Let's at least make sure they understand who we are." After ending the call, Frank stood at his office window, looking out at the stars. He had hoped humanity's integration into the galactic community would be smoother. But perhaps this misunderstanding was inevitable given the cultural differences. The coming weeks would determine whether humans could find their place among the stars, or whether their unique approach to diplomacy and warfare would leave them isolated in a galaxy that couldn't understand them. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Confederation was packed with representatives from over 50 species. The massive dome-shaped room had been built thousands of years ago on a neutral planet. Its walls were lined with symbols from all member civilizations. John Kelly, Earth's senior ambassador, waited calmly as the session began. At 70 years old, with a weathered face and steady hands, he had seen more of life than most. Before his 30 years in diplomacy, he had served as a general in Earth's military forces. The Confederation speaker, a tall being with translucent skin that showed swirling colors beneath, called the session to order. "Today we address concerns regarding Earth's diplomatic practices," the speaker announced. "Specifically, their pattern of sending representatives with military backgrounds without declaring them as such." Murmurs filled the hall. Some species had already taken sides on what the media was calling the human question. "Ambassador Kelly of Earth will address these concerns," the speaker said. John walked slowly to the central podium. He carried no notes or devices. His bearing was straight but not stiff, confident but not arrogant. "Thank you for the opportunity to speak," he began, his voice deep and clear. "I understand there is confusion about Earth's approach to diplomatic representation. Let me be direct. We have never hidden who we are. Our public records show the backgrounds of all our representatives." He paused, looking around the hall. "I myself served as a general for 22 years before becoming a diplomat. Is this deception? No, it is simply our way." The Vespid representative's mandibles clicked loudly. Why do humans not follow the standard practice of bringing separate diplomatic and military delegations? John nodded at the question. Each species has its own culture and history. On Earth, we learned through centuries of conflict that separating those who make peace from those who wage war leads to poor decisions on both sides. He showed his hands, empty and open. "We believe those who negotiate peace must understand war, but those who wage war must understand peace. Many of our greatest peacemakers were once warriors who saw the horror of conflict and dedicated themselves to preventing more of it." The Krell representative stood. "Your diplomats demonstrated combat skills when attacked. This proves they are warriors disguised as diplomats." John shook his head. "They are diplomats who remember how to defend themselves. There is a difference. When your home is threatened, do you not defend it? Does that make you a warrior or simply someone protecting what matters?" He looked around the hall again. On Earth, preserving peace is considered too important to be left solely to those who have never seen war. And waging war is too serious to be left to those who don't understand peace. The Drek representative rose. "If your diplomats possess such skills, what are your actual warriors capable of?" A hush fell over the hall. This was the unspoken fear many species shared, that humans were hiding their true military potential. John's expression remained calm. "Earth maintains defensive forces, as does every civilization. But we don't bring them to peace talks because we believe in separating the act of making peace from the threat of force. We negotiate in good faith, not under the shadow of weapons." He placed both hands on the podium. "Earth doesn't bring armed forces to peace summits because we don't see diplomacy as a continuation of war. We see it as an alternative. Our representatives understand both conflict and cooperation because they've lived both. This isn't deception. It's the core of our approach to peaceful relations." The hall remained silent for several long moments. Then the speaker asked, "Does any delegation wish to formally accuse Earth of diplomatic violations?" The silence continued. Whatever their private thoughts, no species wanted to be the first to make such a serious charge. "Very well," said the speaker. This matter will be referred to the Cultural Exchange Committee for further discussion and recommendations. As John returned to his seat, he knew this wasn't over. But at least now the galaxy understood Earth's perspective. Whether they would accept it was another question entirely. 3 months after Ambassador Kelly's speech, the Galactic Confederation gathered again. This time, the mood was different. The Cultural Exchange Committee had completed its report on Earth's diplomatic practices. Frank Winters sat with John Kelly in the human section of the Grand Hall. Both men wore simple dark suits with small Earth flag pins. "Nervous?" Frank asked quietly. John shook his head. "I've faced worse than alien bureaucrats." The Confederation speaker called the session to order. "Today we review the findings of the Cultural Exchange Committee regarding Earth's approach to diplomatic representation." A tall, willowy being with pale green skin took the central podium. This was Ilara, head of the committee, and known for her fair-minded approach to interspecies issues. "Our committee has conducted extensive research into human history and cultural practices," Ilara began. "We have interviewed human diplomats, studied their public records, and compared their approach to other species." She activated a holographic display showing various diplomatic teams from different worlds. "Most species in our confederation evolved strict separation between those who make war and those who make peace. This pattern likely developed because specialization improved survival chances. Warriors focused on combat, diplomats on negotiation." The display shifted to show human history. Humans evolved differently. Their tribal origins required individuals to be adaptive, both hunters and peacemakers within their groups. This pattern continued even as their civilization advanced. Unlike most species, humans frequently transition between military and civilian roles throughout their lives. Frank noticed several species leaning forward with interest. This historical context seemed to be helping them understand. The committee finds that Earth's practice of sending diplomats with military experience is not deception, but rather a cultural difference we fail to recognize. Ilara continued. "They are not hiding warriors among diplomats. They simply do not make the same rigid distinction between these roles that other species do." The Vespid representative raised a limb to speak. "Does this not still present security concerns? Their diplomats have combat capabilities." Ilara nodded. "A valid question. However, we must consider that all diplomats in this hall have some form of protection. Most bring warrior escorts. Humans simply internalize this function. The outcomes are similar." Across the hall, various representatives began discussions among themselves. Some nodded in understanding. Others still looked skeptical. After careful consideration, Ilara said, "The committee recommends that Earth's diplomatic practices be formally recognized as a cultural variation rather than a violation of protocol. We further recommend establishing a new integrated training program where diplomats from all worlds can learn from each other's approaches." The speaker called for a vote. One by one, species registered their positions. The Drek, surprisingly, voted in favor. The Krell abstained. The Vespid reluctantly accepted the recommendation after adding a security clause. When the final tally appeared, the recommendation had passed by a solid margin. Frank let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "We did it," he whispered to John. Later that day, as the human delegation prepared to return to Earth, they were approached by Zorex, the blue-skinned diplomat from their first contact. "Your approach to diplomacy has created quite the stir," Zorex said. "Several species are now considering similar programs, training their diplomats in basic defensive tactics." John smiled. "And some of our diplomats have expressed interest in learning from your meditation techniques for negotiation." "It seems we all have something to teach each other," Zorex replied. 1 year later, the first Interspecies Diplomatic Academy opened on a neutral moon. The curriculum included elements from many worlds: Zorthan meditation, Vespid consensus building, Krell honor protocols, and yes, human integrated training that combined understanding of both conflict and peace. Frank Winters attended the opening ceremony as Earth's representative. Standing beside diplomats from 17 worlds, he watched students from dozens of species begin their training together. A young Drek approached him, curiosity in his amber eyes. "Is it true that human diplomats understand both peace and war?" Frank nodded. "We believe that understanding both is essential to preventing one and achieving the other." "My people have always valued strength," the young Drek said thoughtfully. "But perhaps there is strength in understanding as well." Frank smiled. The real reason Earth never brought their armed forces to peace summits had become something greater than a cultural quirk. It had become a bridge between different approaches to maintaining peace among the stars.